Hi there, welcome back. My name is John Dwayne, and this is the third in a series of short videos to help homeowners develop and maintain a healthy, attractive lawn, while at the same time doing no damage to the local marine ecosystem. In our neighborhood, that means Hinckley's Pond and the surrounding watershed in Harwich, Massachusetts. If you haven't already watched the first two videos, I encourage you to do so, especially video 2, which covers plant biology and getting a professional soil analysis. Some of what I will talk about today builds on that information. Okay, let's get started with today's video. I've received some comments from viewers that I went through the soil analysis in video 2 perhaps a little too fast, and that it would be nice to talk a little more about the process of getting the analysis done. So let's spend a couple minutes on that. I'll talk about collecting the soil samples and then the ordering procedure. As you may recall, I suggest getting your soil analysis done by a professional. It's not free, but it's worth it. I like the UMass Amherst service. Here's their order form. You can get it from their website. The website has lots of other helpful resources, including detailed instructions on how to collect the soil samples. That's what I'm showing here. So you should read those instructions. An important thing the instructions urge you to do is to collect the samples carefully. So what does that mean? Well, first you have to look at your yard and determine if you have the same conditions everywhere, or if your yard has different soil in different sections. So for instance, my yard has 3 sections. One area is shady with some big oak trees constantly dropping leaves and acorns all over it. And it's got a little moss growing here and there. Another section is sunny and the grass grows thick and full. And the third section is sloping, almost 15 to 20 degrees, and here the grass is a little thin. So for me, the instructions had me take 4 or 5 small soil samples from each section. Then you kind of bundle all those together and you end up with 3 bags of dirt from each section. 3 bags of dirt because I had 3 sections. Then I laid the soil I collected on a flat surface, removed the pebbles and twigs, and let it dry out. After that, it was all dry and clean. I put them in clean bags with labels. Then you fill out the order form. There's a line for each soil sample you're sending in. In mine, I had 3 bags of soil, so I used 3 lines on the form. The form's pretty self-explanatory. My crop code was HA2, since mine was from an already established lawn. I got all the tests done, though after seeing the results, the routine analysis gave me all the information I really needed. And the next time I do this, which might be in 2 or 3 years, I'll save a little money and just get the routine analysis. Finally, the hardest part, you have to find a small cardboard box that will fit all your bags of dirt and your order form and your check, and then off to the post office you go and wait a week or so. The results can be emailed to you, which is awesome since it really speeds up that part of the process. So if you haven't gotten a soil analysis, I really recommend that you do it now. It's really important if you're serious about your lawn and the environment. The next thing we'll talk about today is why we have to be so careful about fertilizing our lawns. What's the big deal? I'll start with the worst case scenario. It can be just terrible. Then I'll talk a bit about how fertilizer interacts with a marine ecosystem. Then a bit about how fertilizer may get from your yard into the pond, lake, or stream. Then finally, what can you as a homeowner do to prevent all this bad stuff from happening? The worst case scenario is that our pond becomes a giant pool of algae like this. This is a picture of an extreme algae bloom. This is a catastrophe for any pond or lake. More often than not, this is caused by poor fertilizer management. We'll get into what is happening chemically in this pond in a minute, but the key thing to understand is that in the short run, the body of water is an eyesore, foul-smelling, and unfit for any type of recreation. In the long run, the pond or lake will probably die. That means the flora and fauna in the body of water will die and the whole thing will eventually dry up. What we want is this. This is Hinckley's Pond in Harwich, Massachusetts on an early spring day. Beautiful to look at. clean, clear water, teeming with fish. So what happened to that pond in the previous picture? Well, some scientists would tell you that it was bound to happen. Well, that's kind of startling, right? What are they talking about? Well, let me explain. Penn State University published an article a few years ago describing the life cycle of a pond. The article is very interesting, and I recommend that you read it. You can find it online. You can see the beginning of the article here. One of the main points the author makes is that ponds have a finite life. They start out with water in a depression in the earth with no fish, no plant life. Eventually, the pond accumulates nutrients that attract aquatic life, mostly plants. Over time, the plants live and grow and die. There remains decay, and the nutrients they use for life are released back into the water to keep the cycle going. Eventually, however, there will be an accumulation of material that will resist decay, and the pond will fill up and become a bog, and then dry land. This may take a decade or a century or 2 centuries, but what we want to do is we want to slow down this natural process as much as possible. The natural processes I just described in the pond are technically called eutrophication. This is what this diagram describes. Now, there's a lot going on in this chart, and it's beyond the scope of this video to explain it all, but I just wanted to introduce the name of this process that will eventually cause a pond or lake to fill up and become dry land. Notice that the introduction of nitrogen and phosphorus, you see them falling from the sky there? They're catalysts for eutrophication. That is, 2 of the main ingredients of lawn fertilizer will speed up eutrophication. They'll speed up the aging process of the pond. Now, there are a number of things that pond owners can do to slow down the aging process. Creating or maintaining buffers of vegetation around the pond is one way. These buffers serve to filter any water flowing into the pond. Removing sediment or reducing the flow of sediment into the pond will help it maintain depth. But for us, homeowners, the main thing we can do is to fertilize intelligently. If we over-fertilize, excess phosphorus and nitrogen are introduced into the pond through the groundwater or surface runoff. As you may recall from the previous video, phosphorus and nitrogen are 2 of the big 5 macronutrients that all plants need to live. As these 2 macronutrients build up in the pond, slow-growing plants, especially algae, become fast-growing plants, and algae blooms are the result. Besides the bad smell and ugly appearance of algae blooms, the silent effects are much worse. Algae releases harmful toxins that kill some plant life and fish. Normal amounts of algae produce such small amounts of these toxins that the impact is tiny. Large amounts of algae produce deadly amounts of these toxins. Plus, the algae requires large amounts of oxygen to grow in the water. So these algae blooms have the effect of deoxygenating the water. Again, killing fish and water plants. Thus, the buildup of plant and animal material at the bottom of the pond increases. Eutrophication. With less oxygen in the water, this material decays much more slowly, if at all, leading to the death of the pond. But this can all be avoided if those living around the pond fertilize intelligently. So, specifically, what can you do? It all starts with getting your soil tested. This way you'll know what your lawn needs. Any fertilizer you add in excess of what your lawn needs will not be absorbed by the grass plants, or it won't bind chemically to the soil. The excess ends up in the groundwater and will likely flow right into the pond. The last thing you can do is pay close attention to any fertilizer granules that end up on your driveway or your sidewalk. On a hard surface, they obviously will not be absorbed by the lawn. Instead, they'll probably get washed away with rainwater, flow into the street, and eventually into the pond. Look around your property and see if there's a downhill route from your driveway to the pond. If there is one, you should be careful to sweep the granules off the driveway and the sidewalk, back into your lawn. So that's it for today. The takeaway here is to understand how much damage can be done to a pond due to bad fertilizer practices. The natural aging process of the pond, from one of nature's great works of art to a dried up bog, can be sped up significantly if we over-fertilize. Let's all agree to slow this process down as much as possible. Next time, we'll talk about fertilizer. How can you use the soil analysis to pick the right fertilizer? So more on that next time. Thank you.